In the heart of Paris, where fashion reigned supreme and elegance was more than just a lifestyle, there stood a small boutique named La Mode Élégante. Nestled between cobblestone streets lined with cafes and flower vendors, this little shop was known for its exclusivity. It wasn't your average clothing store. It catered to those who appreciated luxury in every stitch, every fabric, and every detail. The owner, Madame Dupont, was a tall, poised woman with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. She had built her reputation on being selective about her clientele, ensuring that only the right kind of people walked through her doors. Madame Dupont prided herself on maintaining what she called standards. To her, these standards meant catering exclusively to wealthy customers who could afford her high-priced designs. Her boutique attracted tourists and locals alike, all hoping to catch a glimpse, or perhaps purchase, a piece of Parisian haute couture. But behind her polished exterior lay a rigid belief system. If someone didn't look like they belonged in her world, they weren't welcome. This mindset would soon lead to consequences neither she nor anyone else could have anticipated. On a crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled gently in the breeze outside, a quiet figure entered La Mode Élégante. She was an elderly woman dressed simply but neatly, wearing a warm smile that seemed out of place amidst the extravagant displays inside. Her name was Doris Norris, though no one in the shop knew it at the time. Doris had traveled from Texas to celebrate her birthday in Paris, a city she had always dreamed of visiting. With its charming architecture, rich history, and vibrant culture, Paris felt magical to her. On this particular day, she decided to indulge herself by exploring some of the city's finest boutiques. As Doris stepped into La Mode Élégante, she marveled at the intricate designs hanging delicately on racks, each garment telling a story of craftsmanship and artistry. She wandered slowly, taking in the beauty around her, occasionally brushing her fingers against the soft fabrics. For a moment, she forgot about everything else, the long flight, the jet lag, the unfamiliarity of a foreign land, and allowed herself to be swept away by the allure of Parisian fashion. But not everyone shared her awe. From behind the counter, Madame Dupont watched the elderly woman with growing skepticism. Something about Doris's appearance set off warning bells in her mind. Perhaps it was the simplicity of her outfit, a plain cardigan paired with modest slacks, or maybe it was the lack of designer handbags or flashy jewelry. Whatever the reason, Madame Dupont immediately assumed that Doris wasn't the type of customer she wanted in her boutique. After all, running such an exclusive establishment required careful judgment, or so she believed. Without hesitation, Madame Dupont approached Doris, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. Smiling tightly, she said in a tone that barely concealed her disdain, "Madam, I must inform you that our boutique caters only to those who truly appreciate fine fashion. Perhaps another store might suit your needs better." Her words hung, heavy in the air, dripping with condescension. Doris froze for a moment, stunned by the unexpected rejection. She hadn't expected such treatment, especially not in a city renowned for its hospitality and charm. Still, she maintained her composure, nodding politely before turning to leave. As she stepped back onto the street, clutching her purse tightly, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness, not for herself but for the missed opportunity to connect with something beautiful. Little did she know, however, that her encounter with Madame Dupont would spark a chain reaction far beyond anything either of them could imagine. Unbeknownst to Madame Dupont, the woman she had turned away was none other than the mother of Chuck Norris, a man whose name carried weight not just in Hollywood but across the globe. Known for his martial arts prowess, iconic roles, and larger-than-life persona, Chuck Norris was also beloved for his humility and strong family values. When Doris returned to Texas and recounted the incident over a casual dinner, Chuck listened, intently, his jaw tightening slightly as he absorbed every word. Though he rarely involved himself in personal grievances, something about this story struck a chord deep within him. Chuck Norris had grown up respecting his mother above all else. She had instilled in him the importance of kindness, perseverance, and standing up for what was right. Hearing how she had been treated so dismissively, ignited a fire in him, not one of anger, but of determination. He realized that this wasn't just about his mother. It was about addressing a broader issue of elitism and exclusion that permeated certain corners of society. And if there was one thing Chuck Norris excelled at, it was using his platform to shine a light on injustices. With a calm resolve, Chuck picked up his phone and drafted a post on social media. In it, he recounted the story of his mother's experience at La Mode Elegante, emphasizing the need for respect and inclusivity in all aspects of life. He ended the post with a simple yet powerful hashtag, respect for all. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Fans flooded the boutique's social media pages with comments, calling out Madame Dupont's behavior and demanding accountability. Others began sharing their own stories of similar experiences, creating a wave of solidarity among strangers united by a common cause. Back in Paris, Madame Dupont remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing online. Life at La Mode Elegante continued as usual, or so she thought. Customers still came and went. Employees bustled about attending to tasks, and the city buzzed with its typical energy. Yet beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. What started as a trickle of negative feedback soon turned into a torrent, threatening to wash away everything Madame Dupont had worked so hard to build. When Doris Norris returned to her home in Texas after her trip to Paris, she couldn't shake off the memory of what had happened at La Mode Elegante. Though she tried to brush it aside as a minor inconvenience, the incident lingered in her mind like an unwelcome shadow. It wasn't just the rejection that bothered her. It was the way it made her feel small, insignificant, and invisible. Still, being the kind-hearted woman she was, Doris didn't dwell on it for long. Instead, she decided to share the story with her son, Chuck Norris, during one of their regular family dinners. Chuck listened intently as his mother recounted every detail: the elegant boutique, the beautiful clothes, and the cold demeanor of Madame Dupont. He watched the subtle shifts in her expression as she spoke, noticing how her usual warmth dimmed slightly when describing the encounter. For Chuck, this wasn't just a trivial story about a shopping mishap. It was a reflection of something much deeper, a lack of respect and empathy that he believed no one should ever have to endure, especially not someone as gentle and loving as his mother. Chuck Norris wasn't known for seeking revenge or stirring drama. In fact, throughout his life, he had always emphasized values like kindness, humility, and forgiveness. But this situation felt different. As he processed the story, he realized it wasn't just about his mother. It was symbolic of a larger issue. How many others had been treated the same way? How many people had walked into stores, restaurants, or other places only to be judged based on appearances rather than character? The thought troubled him deeply. Determined to address the matter, Chuck turned to social media, a platform where millions looked up to him not just as an action hero, but as a voice of reason and integrity. Sitting at his desk late that night, he carefully crafted a post. He began by sharing his mother's experience, painting a vivid picture of the events without naming Madame Dupont directly. He described the boutique's exclusivity, the dismissive attitude of its owner, and the emotional impact it had on Doris. Then, he added his own perspective, urging readers to reflect on the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their background or appearance. The post ended with a simple yet powerful message. Respect costs nothing, but its absence can leave scars. Let's strive to create a world where everyone feels valued. Below the text, he included the hashtag #RespectForAll, hoping it would inspire meaningful conversations. Little did he know those few sentences would ignite a firestorm. Within minutes of posting, the internet erupted. Fans from all over the globe flooded Chuck's comment section expressing outrage over the treatment his mother had received. Some shared their own stories of being judged or mistreated because of how they looked, sounded, or dressed. Others praised Chuck for addressing the issue so openly and using his influence to highlight injustices that often went unnoticed. The hashtag #RespectForAll quickly trended worldwide, sparking debates about classism, elitism, and inclusivity. As the hours passed, the focus shifted squarely onto La Mode Elegante. People began searching for the boutique online, eager to learn more about the place that had dared to insult the mother of Chuck Norris. What they found shocked them even further. The boutique's website and social media pages were filled with images of extravagant gowns, designer suits, and accessories, priced far beyond the reach of most people. While some admired the craftsmanship, others criticized the obvious display of opulence, seeing it as a symbol of the very exclusivity Chuck had spoken against. The backlash was swift and merciless. Customers who had previously praised the boutique started deleting their positive reviews, replacing them with scathing critiques. Former patrons recounted their own uncomfortable experiences, claiming they had felt intimidated or unwelcome during past visits. Others admitted they had avoided the store altogether because of its reputation for snobbery. Delivery drivers and suppliers joined the chorus, revealing how Madame Dupont's haughty demeanor extended beyond customers to anyone she deemed beneath her standards. Meanwhile, fans of Chuck Norris took things a step further. They organized virtual campaigns encouraging a boycott of La Mode Elegante, spreading the word across forums, chat groups, and news outlets. Protesters gathered outside the boutique's doors, holding signs that read, "Fashion without heart," and "Inclusivity over exclusivity." Reporters arrived soon after, eager to capture footage of the growing chaos. The once quiet boutique became the center of attention, not for its designs but for the controversy surrounding it. Madame Dupont, however, remained oblivious to the storm brewing around her. At first, she dismissed the sudden drop in foot traffic as a temporary lull, attributing it to seasonal fluctuations or competition from nearby stores. When employees mentioned rumors of online backlash, she waved them off, confident that her loyal customer base would shield her from any real harm. After all, hadn't she built her business on catering to the elite? Surely they wouldn't abandon her over something as trivial as a social media post. But reality soon came crashing down. One morning, as Madame Dupont arrived at the boutique, she noticed a group of protesters standing outside, chanting slogans and holding banners. Confused and irritated, she demanded answers from her staff, who hesitantly informed her about the viral post and the subsequent fallout. Shocked and defensive, Madame Dupont insisted that her actions were justified, that running a high-end boutique required maintaining certain standards. She refused to believe that turning away a single customer could lead to such widespread condemnation. Her denial only fueled the flames. As reporters pressed her for statements, Madame Dupont's responses grew increasingly combative. In interviews, she doubled down on her beliefs, insisting that her boutique was meant for a specific clientele and that she couldn't cater to everyone. Her words, intended to justify her behavior, instead painted her as out of touch and unrepentant. Clips of her interviews circulated online, drawing even more criticism and solidifying her image as the face of elitism. Despite the mounting pressure, there were moments when Madame Dupont allowed herself to wonder if she had made a mistake. Late at night, sitting alone in her office surrounded by racks of unsold clothing, she replayed the events in her mind. Had she misjudged the elderly woman who had entered her store? Was it possible that her rigid adherence to standards had cost her more than she realized? These thoughts gnawed at her, but pride kept her from admitting fault, at least for now. Back in Texas, Chuck Norris monitored the situation closely. While he hadn't anticipated the scale of the reaction, he remained steadfast in his mission to promote kindness and understanding. Watching the global conversation unfold gave him hope that people were ready to challenge outdated notions of exclusivity and embrace a more inclusive worldview. Yet he also understood that true change required more than hashtags and protests. It needed compassion, patience, and a willingness to forgive. Though the storm showed no signs of abating, Chuck couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. His mother's experience had sparked something bigger than either of them could have imagined. And while the road ahead promised to be rocky for Madame Dupont, Chuck knew that even in the darkest storms, seeds of redemption could take root. If only one chose to plant them. The days following the viral uproar were nothing short of chaotic for Madame Dupont and her boutique, La Mode Elegante. What had once been a thriving business, known for its exclusivity and high standards, quickly unraveled into a crumbling enterprise. The fallout was swift and merciless, leaving no aspect of Madame Dupont's life untouched. Customers stopped coming altogether, deliveries were cancelled, employees quit en masse, and even longtime suppliers severed ties with the boutique. It seemed as though the entire world had turned its back on her. At first, Madame Dupont tried to downplay the situation. She convinced herself that this was merely a phase, a temporary dip in fortune brought on by overzealous internet users who didn't understand the intricacies of running a luxury business. But as the days passed, the reality became impossible to ignore. Her boutique, once bustling with well-heeled patrons, now sat eerily empty. The racks of exquisite clothing remained untouched, gathering dust as if mocking her misfortune. The only sounds that echoed through the store were the occasional footsteps of protesters outside or reporters banging on the door, demanding a statement. Madame Dupont's attempts to salvage her reputation proved futile. Every interview she gave seemed to make matters worse. Instead of offering an apology or expressing regret, she doubled down on her beliefs, defending her actions with stubborn pride. "I run a business for a specific clientele," she declared in one televised interview. "Not everyone belongs here, and I won't apologize for maintaining my standards." Her words, meant to justify her behavior, only fueled further outrage. Social media erupted with memes and parodies mocking her elitist attitude, while critics labeled her tone-deaf and out of touch. As the negative press mounted, so did the financial strain. Without customers walking through the doors, revenue plummeted to zero. Suppliers, fearing association with the scandal, refused to deliver new inventory, leaving the boutique with outdated stock that no one wanted to buy. Employees, many of whom had worked at La Mode Elegante for years, began handing in their resignations. Some cited moral reasons, unable to align themselves with Madame Dupont's rigid philosophy, while others simply couldn't afford to stay, without steady paychecks. By the end of the week, the boutique operated with just a skeleton crew, barely enough to keep the lights on. Despite her growing desperation, Madame Dupont clung to her belief that she had done nothing wrong. Each morning she arrived at the boutique dressed impeccably, determined to project an image of strength and resilience. Yet behind closed doors, cracks began to show. Late at night, after sending her remaining staff home, she would sit alone, in her office, staring blankly at the piles of unpaid bills and legal notices stacked on her desk. The weight of her decisions pressed heavily on her shoulders, but pride kept her from admitting defeat. It wasn't until 3 days after the initial rejection of Norris that the full extent of the damage became undeniable. On that fateful morning, Madame Dupont received a letter from her bank informing her that her account had been frozen due to missed payments. Panic set in as she realized the gravity of her predicament. With no cash flow and mounting debts continuing, operations was no longer feasible. That afternoon, she made the painful decision to close La Mode Elegante indefinitely. The closure marked the beginning of a downward spiral for Madame Dupont. Stripped of her livelihood and humiliated in the public eye, she retreated into isolation. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with someone whose name had become synonymous with arrogance and classism. Even members of Paris's elite social circles, whom she had once courted so diligently, turned their backs on her. For the first time in her life, Madame Dupont found herself utterly alone. Yet amidst the chaos there was a glimmer of hope, or at least the possibility of redemption. As the weeks dragged on, Chuck Norris continued to monitor the situation from afar. Though he had ignited the firestorm with his viral post, he never intended for it to destroy Madame Dupont entirely. His goal had always been to spark meaningful change, not vengeance. Moved by a sense of compassion, he decided to reach out directly. One evening, Madame Dupont received an email from an address she didn't recognize. Hesitant but curious, she opened it to find a heartfelt message from none other than Chuck Norris himself. In the email, he expressed empathy for her struggles, acknowledging that everyone makes mistakes. He recounted his own journey, from humble beginnings in Oklahoma to becoming a global icon, and emphasized the importance of learning from failure. Most importantly, he extended an olive branch, inviting her to visit him in Texas for a conversation. Stunned by the gesture, Madame Dupont spent hours rereading the email, searching for hidden motives or sarcasm. But the sincerity in Chuck's words was undeniable. For the first time since the scandal erupted, she allowed herself to feel something other than anger or defensiveness: gratitude. Though she was still reeling from the loss of her boutique, she recognized that this might be her chance to start anew, to rebuild not just her career but also her character. Determined to seize the opportunity, Madame Dupont accepted Chuck's invitation. A few weeks later, she boarded a plane bound for Texas, her heart heavy with both apprehension and hope. When she arrived at Chuck's ranch, she was greeted warmly, despite the circumstances that had brought them together. Over coffee, they spoke candidly about the events that had transpired. Chuck listened patiently as Madame Dupont shared her side of the story, her voice trembling with emotion. He didn't interrupt or judge. Instead, he offered guidance, encouraging her to channel her talents toward creating something more inclusive and meaningful. By the end of their meeting, Madame Dupont felt a renewed sense of purpose. Chuck's kindness and wisdom had shown her that it wasn't too late to change. She returned to Paris with a clear vision: to open a new boutique, one that welcomed people from all walks of life. Gone would be the pretentious displays and rigid standards. In their place would be warmth, accessibility, and a celebration of individuality. It wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding trust took time. But Madame Dupont was ready to put in the work. Though the road ahead promised challenges, Madame Dupont knew she had taken the first step toward redemption. And as she stood on the precipice of a new chapter, she couldn't help but reflect on the irony of it all. What had started as a moment of judgment and exclusion had ultimately led her to embrace the very values she had once dismissed: respect, humility, and inclusivity. Sometimes life has a way of teaching lessons in unexpected ways, and Madame Dupont was determined to learn hers. Madame Dupont's return to Paris marked the beginning of a transformation, not just in her personal life, but in the way she viewed the world and her place within it. The lessons she had learned during her time in Texas with Chuck Norris weighed heavily on her mind. For the first time, she began to see the flaws in the rigid philosophy that had guided her for so long. Her belief in exclusivity, once a source of pride, now seemed shallow and misguided. She realized that true success wasn't measured by wealth or prestige, but by the positive impact one could have on others. Determined to make amends, Madame Dupont threw herself into planning her new venture. This wouldn't be another high-end boutique catering only to the elite. Instead, it would be something entirely different, a store that celebrated diversity, inclusivity, and accessibility. She named it Mode pour tous, which translated to fashion for all. The name itself was a declaration of her newfound mission: to create a space where everyone, regardless of their background or financial status, could feel welcome and valued. The process of launching Mode pour tous was far from easy. Madame Dupont faced numerous challenges, both practical and emotional. Financially, she was starting from scratch. Closing La Mode Elegante had left her deeply in debt, and securing funding for a new business proved difficult. Banks were hesitant to lend to someone whose reputation had been tarnished by scandal. Undeterred, Madame Dupont sold her personal belongings, luxury items she had once cherished, and used the money to fund the initial stages of her project. It was humbling, but she saw it as part of her journey toward redemption. Emotionally, the road was even tougher. Many people in Paris still harbored resentment toward her, viewing her as a symbol of elitism and arrogance. Some former acquaintances refused to acknowledge her presence, while others whispered behind her back. Even strangers who passed by the construction site of her new boutique would stop to glare or mutter under their breath. These moments stung, but Madame Dupont refused to let them deter her. Instead, she channeled her energy into building something that would speak for itself, something that would show the world she was truly sorry. One of the most significant changes Madame Dupont made was in how she approached hiring employees. At La Mode Elegante, She had handpicked staff members based on their appearance and ability to appeal to wealthy customers. Now she sought out individuals who shared her vision of inclusivity and kindness. Among her first hires were several former employees from her old boutique, those who had stood by her during the scandal despite the risks to their own reputations. She also recruited young designers and aspiring fashionistas from diverse backgrounds, giving them opportunities they might not have had elsewhere. To ensure Mode pour tous lived up to its name, Madame Dupont implemented policies that prioritized affordability and accessibility. She introduced a range of price points, ensuring there were options for every budget without compromising on quality or style. She partnered with local artisans and small businesses to showcase unique, handmade pieces alongside more mainstream designs. Every item in the store carried a tag explaining its origin, highlighting the craftsmanship and care that went into creating it. This transparency resonated with customers, many of whom appreciated the effort to support ethical and sustainable practices. But perhaps the most impactful change was in the atmosphere of the boutique itself. Gone were the cold, sterile displays that had dominated La Mode Elegante. In their place, Mode pour tous featured warm lighting, cozy seating areas, and vibrant decor that invited customers to linger and explore. The staff received training, not just in sales techniques, but in empathy and customer service. They were encouraged to engage with visitors, listen to their stories, and help them find pieces that reflected their personalities. For the first time, the boutique felt less like a shrine to luxury and more like a community hub where people could connect over their shared love of fashion. When Mode pour tous finally opened its doors, the response was overwhelming, but not in the way Madame Dupont had feared. Instead of hostility, she was met with curiosity and cautious optimism. Locals trickled in, some out of sheer intrigue, others because they had heard about the dramatic shift in Madame Dupont's approach. To her relief, they found the experience refreshing. Customers marveled at the variety of styles available, the reasonable prices, and the genuine warmth of the staff. Word spread quickly, and soon, Mode pour tous became a beloved fixture in the neighborhood. Of course, rebuilding trust took time. There were still skeptics who doubted whether Madame Dupont's transformation was sincere. Some accused her of using the concept of inclusivity as a marketing ploy to win back public favor. While these criticisms stung, Madame Dupont chose to address them head-on. She invited journalists and influencers to tour the boutique, sharing her story openly and emphasizing her commitment to lasting change. She also launched workshops and events aimed at fostering creativity and inclusivity, such as free sewing classes for underprivileged youth and panel discussions featuring diverse voices in the fashion industry. Slowly but surely, Madame Dupont earned back the respect she had lost. People began to see her not as the haughty owner of La Mode Elegante, but as someone who had taken responsibility for her mistakes and worked tirelessly to make things right. Her humility and determination inspired many, proving that it's never too late to change course. Chuck Norris followed Madame Dupont's progress closely, offering encouragement whenever he could. He sent her messages of support, praised her efforts publicly, and even visited Paris to see Mode pour tous for himself. During his visit, he spent hours talking to Madame Dupont, marveling at how far she had come. "You've turned pain into purpose," he told her. "That's what real strength is all about." As the months passed, Madame Dupont continued to grow both personally and professionally. She no longer cared about being part of Paris's elite circles. Instead, she found joy in serving a broader audience and making a difference in their lives. Mode pour tous thrived, becoming a beacon of hope and inclusivity in a city often criticized for its exclusivity. And though the scars of her past mistakes remained, they served as reminders of how far she had come, and how much farther she could go if she stayed true to her values. In the end, Madame Dupont's journey wasn't just about reinventing her business. It was about rediscovering herself. Through humility, hard work, and a willingness to learn, she transformed not only her boutique, but also her heart. What started as a moment of rejection and loss had blossomed into a story of redemption, resilience, and renewal, a testament to the power of second chances. Madame Dupont's transformation from the owner of an exclusive boutique to the founder of Mode pour Tous became a story that resonated far beyond the streets of Paris. Her journey was proof that even in the darkest moments, there is always room for growth and redemption, if one has the courage to embrace change. Over time, Mode pour Tous flourished into more than just a clothing store. It evolved into a symbol of hope, inclusivity, and resilience. The boutique attracted not only customers but also admirers who were inspired by Madame Dupont's ability to rise above her past mistakes. The atmosphere inside Mode pour Tous was unlike anything else in Paris. It buzzed with energy, laughter, and conversation, creating a sense of belonging for everyone who walked through its doors. Customers ranged from young students browsing affordable accessories to elderly women seeking timeless pieces, all treated with the same level of care and respect. The staff, hand-picked by Madame Dupont herself, radiated warmth and professionalism. They went out of their way to ensure every visitor felt valued, whether they made a purchase or simply came to admire the designs. This shift in attitude transformed what shopping meant, not just a transaction, but an experience rooted in connection and humanity. One of the most remarkable aspects of Mode pour Tous was its commitment to giving back to the community. Madame Dupont introduced programs aimed at empowering underrepresented groups in the fashion industry. She partnered with local schools to offer internships to students interested in design, tailoring, and retail management. These internships weren't just about teaching technical skills. They were designed to instill confidence and creativity in young minds. Many participants credited their experiences at Mode pour Tous with helping them discover their passion and pursue careers they had never thought possible. In addition to mentorship programs, Madame Dupont launched initiatives to support sustainable fashion practices. She collaborated with eco-friendly brands and encouraged recycling by offering discounts to customers who brought in old clothes for repurposing. Every garment sold at Mode pour Tous came with information about its environmental impact, promoting awareness among shoppers. These efforts earned her recognition from environmental organizations, further solidifying her reputation as a leader in ethical fashion. As Mode pour Tous grew in popularity, so did Madame Dupont's influence. Journalists and influencers flocked to interview her, eager to learn more about her incredible turnaround. She spoke candidly about her past mistakes, acknowledging how her elitist mindset had blinded her to the needs of others. "I used to think success was defined by exclusivity," she admitted during one televised interview. "But now I know that true success comes from making people feel seen, heard, and appreciated, regardless of who they are or where they come from." Her honesty struck a chord with audiences worldwide. People admired her vulnerability and determination to rebuild her life on better principles. Social media platforms lit up with stories of individuals who had been inspired by her journey. Some shared their own struggles with judgment and rejection, while others praised her for setting an example of accountability and grace. Hashtags like second chances and Your Fashion for All trended alongside mentions of Mode pour Tous, sparking conversations about inclusivity and compassion across industries. Meanwhile, Chuck Norris continued to champion Madame Dupont's cause, using his platform to amplify her message. He frequently referenced her story during interviews and public appearances, emphasizing the importance of treating others with kindness and respect. "What Madame Dupont has done is nothing short of extraordinary," he said during a press conference. "She took a difficult situation and turned it into something beautiful. That's the kind of strength we should all aspire to." Their unlikely friendship blossomed into a partnership dedicated to spreading positivity. Together, they launched campaigns encouraging businesses to adopt more inclusive practices. They visited schools, community centers, and events to share their stories and inspire others to embrace change. Their collaboration became a shining example of how two vastly different people could unite for a common purpose and achieve greatness together. Despite her newfound success, Madame Dupont remained humble. She often reflected on how much she had learned throughout this process, not just about running a business, but about herself. The rejection she had faced after closing La Mode Elegante had taught her humility, patience, and the value of second chances. She realized that failure wasn't the end of the road. It was an opportunity to grow stronger and wiser. And though she still encountered occasional criticism from skeptics, she no longer let it define her. Instead, she focused on living her values every day, knowing that actions speak louder than words. Mode Porteuse eventually expanded beyond Paris, opening locations in cities around the world. Each new store carried the same mission: to make fashion accessible and enjoyable for everyone. As the brand grew, so did its impact. Thousands of lives were touched by Madame Dupont's vision, from aspiring designers given a platform to showcase their work, to everyday customers who finally found a place where they truly belonged. Looking back on her journey, Madame Dupont couldn't help but smile. What had started as a painful rejection had led her down a path she could never have imagined. She had gone from being vilified to celebrated, from exclusion to inclusion, from despair to triumph. Through it all, she had discovered the power of empathy, forgiveness, and perseverance. Most importantly, she had proven that no matter how far someone falls, they can always rise again, if they're willing to take responsibility for their actions and strive to do better. And as for Doris Norris, she visited Mode Porteuse during one of her trips to Paris, accompanied by her son Chuck. Walking through the vibrant space filled with diverse customers and smiling employees, she felt immense pride, not just in her son's role in sparking change, but in the woman Madame Dupont had become. "You've created something truly special here," Doris said warmly, shaking Madame Dupont's hand. "Thank you for turning my small moment into such a meaningful lesson." Tears welled up in Madame Dupont's eyes as she replied, "No, thank you, Doris. Without your courage and grace, none of this would have been possible." In that moment, surrounded by the fruits of her labor, Madame Dupont understood that her story wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been judged, excluded, or underestimated. And in sharing it, she hoped to remind the world that respect, kindness, and inclusivity are the threads that bind us all together, weaving a tapestry far richer and more beautiful than any piece of fabric could ever be.